Welcome to Freezer Meals 101, the Christie edition. We're in my kitchen today. Charlotte is away at a conference, so we are going to spend time in my kitchen today, and I am going to walk you through 5 ground beef recipes that we have never done before. We realized that we had never done a lasagna, we had never done a shepherd's pie, and we typically don't do raw ground beef. When people say that they're making freezer meals, or when I tell people that I make freezer meals, a lot of times they just say, oh, so like a lot of soups and casseroles and lasagnas? It's so much more than that, of course. But it is true, we've never done a lasagna. Growing up, we never had lasagna at our house. I don't know, my dad didn't like it, my mom didn't make it, so I never really learned how to make a good lasagna. So my friend's husband asked his mother-in-law, Mom, you make the best lasagna, show me how to make your lasagna. And I heard him and I'm like, I'm coming, I want to know how to make a good lasagna. So this is very different from the lasagna recipe that's on the back of the lasagna noodles box. It's so full of different kinds of meat and different kinds of spices, and it's still a classic lasagna, and it's so good. I'm not a professed expert at lasagna because I learned how to do this later in life. I'm sure there'll be lots of tips out there that our YouTube viewers can give us that will help me along my way in my lasagna making. The shepherd's pie recipe that we are making is a Gordon Ramsay shepherd's pie that I saw on YouTube years ago, and I make it every once in a while when we just have those extra leftovers. That's the beauty of shepherd's pie, you can put anything in it. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to take the Gordon Ramsay shepherd's pie that I've been making and adapt it into a freezer meal, and we'll see if it works. I've never done it before. I then am going to make a barbecue meatloaf. What's really special about this one is that it comes with a sauce that you put right on it, and it helps flavor it, and it's a homemade barbecue sauce. It's really simple and people enjoy it. You can make it right into the tin, or you can do it in bags so that it lays flat. You just thaw and put it into your own dish when you're ready to cook it. The last 2 I'm going to make are meatball recipes. We have a Smoky BBQ meatball that has liquid smoke and our own barbecue sauce. And the last one is a sweet and sour meatball. I'm so glad you could join me today in my kitchen for a change. And let's get started. This first recipe is the Amazing Lasagna by my friend's mom. It starts with some lasagna noodles that I have cooked, and they're off to the side. It's got 3 pounds of ground beef and a pound of mild Italian sausage and half a pound of mild Italian sausage and half a pound of hot Italian sausage. A can of diced tomatoes, a can of crushed tomatoes, 2 packets of spaghetti seasoning, garlic, oregano, salt and pepper, 2 blocks of shredded mozzarella, ricotta or dry cottage cheese, a package of frozen spinach, an egg, tomato paste, and Parmesan cheese is optional. For about 10 years, I have been making Gordon Ramsay's shepherd pie. I just Googled it one day and I found his video on YouTube, and that's the shepherd's pie I've been making from then on. I'm going to attempt to do it as a freezer meal. Lots of times people say they make shepherd's pie as freezer meals. We've never done it. Typically, if we're going to freeze potatoes, we buy frozen potatoes that are hash browns or tater tots, for example, and we know that they're going to freeze nicely. We've never done it where we are going to cook the potatoes, mash them, and then freeze them ourselves. This is our first attempt at doing this. This has ground beef, salt and pepper, grated onion, which ends up being more like an onion pulp once you grate the onion. I think next time I would just use minced. I think other times I use minced. Grated carrots and minced garlic, Worcestershire sauce, tomato paste, red wine, thyme, rosemary, and chicken stock. In Gordon Ramsay's video, of course, he's doing this on the stove and I'm combining all these things and letting them cook down. I'm going to adjust it a little bit by just putting it all together ahead of time, mixing it, and then putting it in a pan, and then I'll top it with the mashed potatoes. What he says to do for mashed potatoes is have your mashed potatoes, you add salt and pepper, 2 to 4 egg yolks, and then generous amounts of Parmesan cheese, because when you bake it in the oven, that's going to be part of what makes it brown nicely. And he even goes as far as to say how his mother does it with a fork to make it look proper and British. And our British viewers can inform me how proper and British that really is to do. When it's defrosted, you would bake this for 18 to 20 minutes at 350. I would say I would do it a little bit longer because in this case, we're starting out with cold food, whereas if I was making this from scratch, I would have it already hot in the pan. So I would maybe increase that to be at least half an hour, maybe even 45 minutes. We're gonna give it a go. This one is called BBQ Meatloaf. It's one of my favorites and it's got a few weird ingredients that you don't normally see. Breadcrumbs are in it, which is normal, but it has graham cracker crumbs in it as well, which just kind of sweetens it a little bit, and it's a nice addition. It has a sauce that comes with it, so you can do it 2 ways. You can put it in a bag and then have the sauce in a medium-sized freezer bag and staple them together. And then on the day of cooking, you can just defrost them and put the meatloaf into your pan. I like to use an 8x8 cookie or an 8x8 cake pan, but you could use a regular loaf pan as well. And then the sauce you put on top right then, and then you cook it in the oven for about an hour. The other way you can do it is you can get, if you can spare an 8x8 pan and put it in your freezer, that's fine, but you can use a tinfoil one, and you can put the sauce right on it at the time. But you do want to make sure that you thaw this one thoroughly before you put it in the oven, if you freeze it that way, because it won't cook in the full hour. And if you start it from frozen, the outsides are going to be very much overcooked while the inside might still be raw. So this is a good one that you have to thaw before you cook. You cannot cook this one from frozen. It is good. It's got the beef. I'm using 2 pounds, breadcrumbs, as well as the graham cracker crumbs, milk, onion, eggs, pepper, and onion soup mix. And then the sauce has brown sugar, dry mustard, ketchup, and some chili sauce. I'm gonna actually weigh out my meat to begin with because I have a large Costco pack and I only needed 1.5 pounds, but there's 7 pounds in this package. So I'll have some left over, which is good, but I do need to have the right amount, otherwise the other ingredients will be off kilter for what we're doing here. The next recipe I'm going to do is Smoky BBQ Meatballs. It is 1.5 pounds of lean ground beef, evaporated milk, oatmeal, eggs, chopped onion, fine chopped onion, so minced onion, garlic cloves, salt and pepper, chili powder, and a package of onion soup mix. For those that don't know, if you just buy it at the bulk barn, 3 tablespoons is how much there is in 1 package of onion soup mix. And then it comes with a sauce. So it has ketchup, brown sugar, the liquid smoke, and in this case I have hickory liquid smoke, and some more garlic cloves. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix all the meatballs together, or mix the meat together, and then make the meatballs, and then you cook them a little bit ahead of time. I'm going to put them in the oven at 350 for about 25 minutes, just to have them keep their shape, and then I will let them cool and put them in the freezer bags with the sauce, so that they can keep their shape, and then on the day of, you can put it in the oven or in the slow cooker, or you could even microwave them because they're going to be fully cooked. One more thing I want to note when I am working with ground beef or if I'm working with chicken a lot, it's really beneficial to have a sink full of hot soapy water that's easily accessible, because this is something that you do use your hands with the raw meat, and lots of times you're grabbing other things. So to avoid cross-contamination, I have the hot soapy water close to me. I often wash my hands and dry them before I move on to the next stage. I'm gonna start scooping these meatballs now. I wanted to point out two ways that you can, well, you can do it any way you want. You could do it by the tablespoonful if you want. I have this handy scoop. It is 2 tablespoons. Or if you wanted, you could use your 2 tablespoon scoop, scrape it off evenly and make one. Or if you took your 1/4 cup and scooped it in there, a 1/4 cup is 4 tablespoons. So I know that if I take this amount and put them in half, they're each going to be a 2 tablespoon meatball, which is a nice size. We could go a little bit smaller. I wouldn't want to go too much bigger, but I wanted to show you the option. And yes, even though I did scoop it on there and it will flatten out a little bit, I still at least like to pretend that it's going to be in a meatball shape, and I roll it anyway. So I'm just going to finish these up here and get this in the oven. So you might notice that I'm kind of got them haphazardly on the cookie sheet here. For me, it's just getting them scooped and then shaped. Meatballs are unlike cookies in that instead of growing, they shrink when you cook them. So we can actually put these pretty close together. I don't like to make them touch, but I can get 5 or 6 on a row pretty easily. And so I wanted to get, just for speed's sake, as many out of the bowl and onto the pan as I could. And then I'm going to make more room. So I'll line them up nicely. I was making freezer meals with a friend one time before I met Charla. That one looks a little bit small, so I'm making it a little bit bigger. And we did 2 kinds of meatballs, which I don't generally recommend if you're doing big batch because it takes a long time to roll. And it's just an extra step, and just do one kind is my recommendation. If you have lots of hands for rolling and doing it, go ahead, but it sometimes can be a lot. But we were doing all the meatballs and then we were gonna divide them in between the bags, and she was just kind of slapping them anywhere she could find on the pan, and I was doing mine in nice neat rows. And her dad was there helping, and he was also doing them in nice neat rows, and she was making fun of us for being so, I don't like to use the word anal when I'm working with food, but we were being a little neurotic about it. And so when the meatballs came out of the oven and they were cooled, I said, okay, you go ahead and count all of these and divide them into bags evenly. And the ones that were on our trays went zip, 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 because you could do the math really quickly. And on her trays, she really had to count each one. So you just do it however you want to do it. But making them in nice neat rows does help for counting a little bit later on if that's important to you. You can make freezer meals your own, however you'd like. There, that zipped them up. So we have 6 times 4. Oh, look, that's 24, 25, 26. And then I have a few more left here to do in the tray. Here we are back with another set of meatballs. These ones are sweet and sour meatballs. It is going to be 1.5 pounds of ground beef, graham cracker crumbs, some chopped onion, and in this case I've minced. I like it a little bit finer when I'm doing meatballs. More onion soup mix, and if you missed it before, 3 tablespoons is equal to 1 package of onion soup mix. Some pepper, eggs, and milk. This calls for milk for a freezer meal, which is weird. Milk doesn't always freeze really nicely, so we often will use other milk products instead, like heavy whipping cream or evaporated milk, because sometimes milk will separate and makes the texture funny of things. So in this case, I'm going to use evaporated milk. And then the sauce for it has 1 can of pineapple chunks, green bell pepper cut into strips, and then the sweet and sour sauce is brown sugar, cornstarch, vinegar, and soy sauce. And you can do this in the slow cooker when it's time or in the oven. But again, I'm gonna roll them and then cook them in the oven for 25 minutes and let them cool before I put them in the bag. That way they are fully cooked, they will keep their shape, and it won't affect things. They won't feel overcooked or anything. We're gonna still be delicious on baking day. There you have it. We've got 5 more meals to go into the freezer. Technically 6 because I was able to split that lasagna into 2. The recipe even says it's for 1 large casserole dish or 2 9x13 pans. What I usually do if I'm making the big one is I use my big rectangle roaster. It's very big and it does the job. We're a family of 4. We're not going to eat a huge one every time, so it is nice to have that made into 2. I've got sweet and sour meatballs, Smoky BBQ Meatballs, barbecue meatloaf, barbecue meatloaf with the barbecue sauce on the back, shepherd's pie, and then the 2 amazing lasagnas. I think that is a very good day's work. It took me about an hour for prep, and I will say these meals took me quite a bit longer. They were fairly involved, meaning there's many steps to each of them. For the shepherd's pie, we had to brown the beef, but we also had to cook the potatoes and mash them. It went together fairly quickly. The lasagna, of course, took a while because we had to brown the beef and the sausage. We had to cook the noodles on the day of, and we had to mix the cottage cheese and spinach together, and then we had to build it. So that one takes a little bit of time. The meatloaf took no time at all. It was very quick. The meatballs take a bit of time because they're quick to go together, but you have to take the time to make each meatball, and then we cook them in the oven. So that takes a bit of time. I wouldn't recommend that you do all of these specific ones on one day because it is a little bit overwhelming. It was a few hours for me to do the job today, but they're going to be still nice to have in my freezer. And if you're doing other easy ones that are just dump and go, then they won't be so bad to sprinkle a few heavier involved ones in there. One thing I did take for granted doing it at my house instead of at Charla's, she has about 1 million giant bowls, and I have 1, maybe 2. So I had to use like a large salad bowl today to store things. Where I take it for granted. We go to her house to do the freezer meals all the time, and she has a lot of big bowls, which is very, very nice. I just ended up washing it over and over again and using it all the time, which is okay too. Not everybody needs to be equipped like you have a family of 9, like they do. I have a lot of little bowls, so that saved me today when I had the sauces, because I could get them going and they could sit while I was waiting for the meatballs to cook and stuff like that. So I learned some stuff today, and I hope you learned some stuff too. Thanks for stopping in. Bye!